Right now, all over the world, archaeological excavations are turning back the pages of time. This detective work is revealing clues to the past which have been hidden for centuries. Through archaeology, we can learn about who we are and where we've come from. And it might also be able to give us an idea of what the future has in store for us. Archaeology can be hard and sometimes frustrating work, but it is also rewarding and exciting. This is Archaeology.
ساعتي لاقينا وجت يده على يدي في ساعة الصفينا.
We are going to one area of the world which has fascinated treasure hunters, historians and archaeologists for a long time, Western Asia. Here in Western Asia, three of the world's great religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, began. Some of the world's earliest written records are found here. And it was from here that our system of law began. At this crossroads of ancient civilizations, the world's first cities prospered, trade flourished, and diverse cultures interacted. In this, the heart of Western Asia, surrounded by larger powers, lies the country of Jordan. Jordan is one area of the world where people have lived for many thousands of years. Much of Jordan is desert. In the south, the towering cliffs of Wadi Rum create a spectacular vista. Although the country seems harsh to the outsider, there is life in this ancient land. This is the home of the Bedouin. And over the years, these people have learned to cope with the difficult challenges of a desert environment. But not all Jordan is desert. In the west is the Jordan Valley, and here the land is well watered and fertile. Crops flourish, and shepherds tend their flocks. Sometimes when you're in Jordan, you get the impression that time has stood still. But of course, this is only an illusion. Jordan is no time capsule. In fact, here, like everywhere else in the world, changes have been taking place since the remote past. Ancient Egyptians, Alexander the Great, the Romans, the Crusaders, and mighty Islamic rulers have all passed through and have left their mark on the landscape of this country. To unravel the twists and turns of Jordan's history, archaeologists seek out those clues to the past which survive in the present. These clues can come in many forms. At some sites, the evidence is hard to miss. These are the incredible tombs of Petra, carved from the mountains themselves. The ancient builders of this unique place were the Nabateans. They chose their city well. The main entrance is down a twisting, narrow gorge known as the Sikh. It stretches for over 2 kilometres, and any attacker would have found it hard indeed to conquer Petra. At the end of the Sikh, the valley opens out and the majesty of the city is revealed. And there is nowhere else quite like Petra. Not only did the red sandstone mountains protect the city, but they were to become part of the city itself. The stone was easy to work, allowing the Nabateans to carve just about anything they wanted, and this they did. The hills are dotted with beautiful houses, graceful theatres and mighty tombs. all carved from the amazing red cliffs. To uncover the secrets of Petra, archaeologists study these buildings in detail. Different styles of architecture and decorations are recorded and compared. Gradually, some patterns emerge and a story unfolds. We find influence from far-off Alexandria, of Roman conquest, and evidence of incredible wealth earned from the trade of precious frankincense. At other sites, like Jerash in the north of Jordan, archaeologists perform other tasks. Jerash is sometimes called the Pompeii of the East, because it is also an intact Roman city, almost 2,000 years old. While some of the larger buildings were still standing when the site was first visited by archaeologists, a lot of work has gone into uncovering the city and rebuilding the monuments from their original stones so that we can get an idea of what the city looked like. The result is stunning, a product of many years of careful work by the archaeologists, conservators and labourers. Reconstructing even one building can take over 10 years. Here at Jerash, the archaeologists are builders, rebuilding and conserving so that the monuments survive and life is breathed once more into this ancient city. Other sites need a different approach. This is Shobak Castle, a Crusader fortress which was captured by the great Arab general Salah ad-Din. Compared to some of the other ancient sites, Shobak is almost modern history, even if it is nearly 1,000 years old. When Shobak was built, written records were relatively common. A written record, however, will not tell the full story, and archaeologists must use both the evidence they find at the castle itself and from other sources to piece together the past. In what stages was the castle built? What events took place here? And what became of the castle after the last soldier left? While Petra, Jerash and Shobak are hard to miss, often archaeologists have to dig to find the answers they seek. This is the type of archaeology which is the most common. Trenches, trowels, picks and an endless stream of soil being moved. And this is the type of work which we will be taking a closer look at. This work is happening at a site called Pella in the north of the Jordan Valley, and it is a good example of a large archaeological excavation. Many hands are needed to run an excavation, up to 80 people in a project of this size. Most of the team of archaeologists at Pella travel from Australia each year, and after they arrive in Jordan, they're joined by Jordanian archaeologists and men from the local village. The men from the village work with the archaeologists during spring as their crops ripen in the fields around them. This brings in a useful income, and by harvest time the work here is over and the team from Australia have left.
Any more? That's it, is it?
Archaeology is serious research and life in the field can be hot and dusty. But the mood is usually good and some great and lasting friendships develop.
Yes. Yeah, ask him.
A season at Pella can be the experience of a lifetime. During their time at the site, the team's home is in this building, which they call the dig house. The dig house is the centre of their activities. Here, a cook prepares their meals, and the archaeologists have a base in which they can both work and relax. The building has sleeping areas, workrooms and laboratories, and it is here that all material from the excavations is processed.
That's a bit of burnt bone.
The archaeological work at Pella has shown that this ruined city has an unbroken history, stretching back into the distant past. Thousands of years ago, Pella was a village which grew into a walled town until it finally became a sprawling city. Sheep now graze among the ruins of ancient Pella, but beneath their feet are the clues to an incredible history. People have lived here for so long because there has always been good water available. And nearby is some of the most fertile land in the Jordan Valley. It was simply a matter of, if you have it this good, why leave? Archaeologists think that some of the early settlers in this region, who came here more than 8,000 years ago, might have lived in permanent camps, similar to the camp of this modern Bedouin family who live near the Pella site. This is the family of Juma, the mother of Juma. This family are quite prosperous sheep farmers. The money they make from their sheep could easily buy them a house in town, but they prefer to live a traditional Bedouin lifestyle in their tent, close to their land and surrounded by their animals. Unlike the Bedouin in other parts of Jordan, the family of Juma is not nomadic. They stay all year in this one camp. Around them lies the evidence of their existence. Small huts, post holes for tents, and objects which have been lost or thrown away. These fragments of their daily life are the first stage of a new layer of archaeological deposit. While the camp of Juma is very much a modern deposit, there is much around the camp which reminds us of the deposits left by the early settlers at Pella. Some things, such as how the tent is erected, have hardly changed. Thousands of years ago, some of the people in this area also settled into villages. These villages were quite small, but some of them became the seeds of sprawling, bustling cities. Like the inhabitants of Tabakat Fahal, a village near Pella, these early villagers lived in houses made from mud brick. Because they did not move around, their rubbish also collected in one spot. Generation after generation would build new houses and would throw their rubbish around them. Slowly the rubbish became buried by new layers of earth and debris. Mud brick houses would, with time, be abandoned or collapse, and as the winter rains fell, these unfired mud bricks would dissolve back into the clay from which they'd been made. Each time this happened, the old house, with its rubbish and bits and pieces, was buried. Over thousands of years, an artificial mound will develop, with one collapsed house on top of the other. We call such mounds in Western Asia tells. These tells are a storehouse of human history, the artefacts of one people on top of another, and Pella is a beautiful example of a tell. The tell at Pella is over 15 metres high. 15 metres of compacted history, stretching back 8,000 years. Day by day, the archaeologists at this site work their way down from the present day on the top of the tell, peeling back the years, the centuries, the millennia, to the oldest and deepest levels at the bottom of the tell. As they work, many stories are unearthed. Mostly stories about ordinary people like you and me. The remains of seeds will tell us what a family ate for dinner in the year 3000 BC.
So, join the dots archaeology.
We can see what types of houses people lived in long ago, and how a Roman in this region was buried, a little after the time of Christ. The layers of the tell have built up over a long time, and you could think of each layer as a new page of history. The archaeologist needs to be able to recognise the layers. Otherwise, the pages of history can become mixed. One layer might be a sandy colour from the floor of a kitchen, and the one below might be ash from an altar fire. But the two layers may have been laid down 100 years apart. Picking one level from another is a skilled job. Some layers are laid neatly one on top of the other, and they're quite easy to recognise. But if at some time a rubbish pit was dug down through the levels, then later artefacts could become mixed with earlier ones. Later in time, an erosion gully might form, again cutting down into the lower levels. Still later, a person digs foundation trenches for their house, again cutting down through lower levels. Because of such disturbance to the layers of the tell, if you were to simply excavate straight across the tell, you could be mixing artefacts from many different periods. So in the end, archaeology is like putting together the pieces of a giant three-dimensional jigsaw, where you have to think carefully about what each change in soil colour means, and where each piece of evidence belongs in the big picture. No one can be sure where the next clue is going to come from. And often it is only after a while that we recognise the importance of something which seemed insignificant at first. To record the trench as fully as possible, each level and the objects found with it are written up in the dig book, which is a day-by-day record of work in the trench. After this, an artefact or wall will have to be planned and photographed. At the end of the day, the archaeologists should be able to place every object from their trench back in the exact spot where they found it. If the archaeologists should miss something, a trench can never be redug. The information is lost forever. All this careful recording takes time, so work in the trench can be very slow, and it can take many years to reach the lowest levels of the tell. Today, archaeology is a science, but not long ago, the work was more like treasure hunting, where age-old deposits were ripped apart to find priceless museum pieces. Now, the scene has changed. Whereas archaeologists in the past ignored one period to find the treasure of another, today, every level is treated with the same care and respect. The sense of adventure and discovery lives on, but other questions are being asked. Today, we are just as interested in the life of the farmer as we are in the life of the king. A piece of pottery from far away now creates as much excitement as finding gold.
Put it back together, believe it or not.
Often this work is done with picks, shovels and wheelbarrows because there is so much soil to be removed. But when the work becomes fine, the standard tools of the archaeologist, the trowel and brush, are used. With these tools, new things are revealed every day. A floor last walked on over 3,000 years ago. A piece of beautiful pottery. The wall of a house. A seed from a crop grown 1,000 years ago. Finds like these, however large or small, help the archaeologists to piece together the history of the site. We now know that 6,000 years ago, people stored their grain in this large jar. 4,000 years ago, the city was defended by this mighty mud brick wall. At the time of ancient Egypt's power, a king lived in this large house overlooking the spring. After the time of Christ, the region's citizens worshipped in this magnificent cathedral. People lived in these houses and walked these streets. At times it is like they were only here yesterday. In one area, a collapsed church is being uncovered. As it is slowly revealed, we discover that it was toppled by an earthquake over 1,000 years ago, and that before it was destroyed, parts of it were being used not as a church, but as a stable for camels. In another area, a gateway into a fort over 5,000 years old is being investigated. This fortress is one of the oldest in Jordan, and its discovery is helping to rewrite the history books. But as one question is answered, others arise. Now that we have the fortress, we want to know who built it, and who were they trying to keep out? As this mystery unfolds in one part of the site, an ancient grave is being excavated in another. On top of the body, the archaeologists find the pottery vessels used in the final funeral meal. As the first vessel is removed from the soil, which has protected it for thousands of years, new mysteries begin. Who was this person? How did they live? And how did they die? When the trenches have been properly recorded, the objects are carried back to the dig house for further study. At the dig house, the pottery is washed, sorted and catalogued. Because there is so much of it, pottery is used to date a particular level and to give clues about the history of the people who used it. Pottery, which has been brought here from far away, allows the archaeologists to work out ancient trade routes and to see who might have influenced the people here. Even the smallest piece of pottery can tell us a lot. After they've been catalogued, the artefacts from the excavations are conserved, photographed, and finally drawn. Only now can the archaeologists be sure that accurate records exist for each piece as soon as it has been excavated. And there are many different types of artefacts to consider. An ancient coin can give dates and information on the government of the day. A scarab pendant from a tomb reveals that there was contact with ancient Egypt. A hoard of bronze spears gives us clues to the technique of the blacksmith, who made them over 3,000 years ago. Each artefact can be both beautiful and exciting, and each one can also provide important information on the history of the region. Elsewhere in the dig house, archaeologists examine some of the smallest types of artefacts from the excavations. Fragments of animal bones and the tiny seeds from ancient plants. But while things this small may seem insignificant, they can provide valuable information. They show us how much humans have affected the plant life and the environment of the area. With thousands of years of encouragement and selection by humans, the seeds of food crops have become larger and more common. At the same time, the seeds of wild plants have become fewer. It is the same story with the animal bones. The leftovers from ancient meals show us how people's diet has altered as they changed their environment. As time went by, those animals useful to humans began to crowd out the wild species, and we find more of their bones in the rubbish piles of cities like Pella. Even the bones of rats and mice can give information about the condition of the environment. Research shows that the hills around Pella were once covered in forests of oak and pistachio trees, and that wild deer, gazelle and wolves were common.
Feed, yes.
Now the forest and the animals are gone. The hills are bare, and erosion is a major problem. Because such things can be seen in the archaeological record, Western Asia is a perfect place to chart environmental changes over many years. At Pella, we can see that people have caused serious environmental damage in the distant past. And we can also see that these people, and the generations who followed them, have paid a high price for this. In fact, at one time, environmental collapse seems to have forced the population out of the area, and the once thriving settlement of Pella became deserted. This close link between people and their environment is a major interest of archaeologists. Their studies have allowed us to look with fresh vision at the environmental changes happening in the world today. If we can learn anything to make our own future more secure, we should listen to the lessons of the archaeological work here. The message is loud and clear. Ultimately, our prosperity, and even our very survival, depends on our learning to respect our environment. In the meantime, the history of the region is still unfolding, and as the team dig deeper on the tell at Pella, new archaeological deposits are being formed nearby. Each piece of rubbish today may be tomorrow's artefact. After all, many of the artefacts uncovered at the site were once rubbish. Slowly, this rubbish will be buried. Some will be lost forever. Some will be found by future archaeologists. What seems to be ordinary today may be spectacular in the future. As these houses in the local village fall out of use and collapse, what will they tell the future about today's world? What artefacts will survive to paint a picture of these people's lives? What questions might future archaeologists ask if they decide to excavate the camp of Umjuma? What might the remains tell them? Will a pattern of post holes and a scattering of household debris show the whole picture? How can deposits like these reveal the friendliness and hospitality of this family? Archaeology can sometimes make you feel very small and insignificant. At Pella, every wall and every piece of pottery speaks of generations after generations of people who are long since gone. Then suddenly, you're able to imagine the vastness of human history in the dense layering of the tell. You can almost hear the noise of millions of voices shouting their stories across the ages. The stones of Pella cannot speak, but if we open our eyes, we might be able to understand some of what they have to tell us. Archaeology helps us to recognise this wealth of knowledge that the earth is guarding for us. Knowledge about the past, about our lives today, and even about where we may be headed in the future.
ملكتوني ما عاد بالدنيا طماع غير شوفتكم بعدكم اصبح عليم ملكتوني وما عاد بالدنيا طماع غير شوفكم وبعدكم اصبح عليم ودعتها وصعب علي الوداع صعب على قلب الشقايا القابدين صعب على قلب الشقايا القابدين صعب على قلب الشقايا القابدين